folks, this is the Nutty Knife guy. I got a new camera, not a great camera, may not even be a good camera, but it is an actual camera and not my cell phone. So yay me. It is also sitting on a tripod. Yay me again. I'm trying to get better at this, folks. As the title of this video suggests, I am going to be reviewing a knife, but my co-host Jolly Roger is still out cavorting with his pirate friends, and I cannot find him. When he returns, he will be punished. But tonight we're going to be doing, well, it's night now. When I go at the test, it will be the next day and it will be daylight. But the first part of this, kind of a tabletop review minus the tabletop, is going to be a piece from United Cutlery. Now, I have not had a lot of success with United Cutlery products. I have four. I have a Honshu push dagger. I've got a special agent or secret agent double-edged dagger. I can't remember what it was called, a boot knife or boot knife. I can't remember if it was special agent or double agent or secret agent or agent something. And a couple of really crappy double little knives about yay big that you were supposed to be able to wear in a sheath behind your back. The only thing crappier than those knives was the sheath. So I kind of made a vow to myself that I would never buy another United Cutlery product, no matter how cool they looked, because they make some cool looking stuff. But I was scrolling the internet looking at knife porn, as knife guys do, and I came across one that looked really, really cool from the United Cutlery's Combat Commander line. Now the thing is this, it was United Cutlery, and it was $37. And I didn't want to do another United Cutlery, but this one looked really, really cool. So I looked up the specs, and it was supposed to be 1065 steel. United Cutlery uses like really crappy, most generally uses really crappy 420 steel. Anodized or aircraft grade aluminum, some high grade aluminum handles, full tang. And as I said, it just looked really cool. So I decided to give United Cutlery a chance in the hope that I would actually get something halfway decent. And here it is. The United Cutlery Combat Commander Sentry Trench knife. Now, I like this because it has kind of a cyberpunk, sci-fi vibe that still goes back to the old classic World War I trench knives. I didn't have a knuckle duster trench knife in the collection, and United says, as I said, this is 1065 high carbon steel, and it appears to be that way. It is not the crappy 420 steel that I have come to associate with most United Cutlery products. So I gave it a shot. Now, on the United Cutlery website itself, its MSRP is a whopping $70. I would not have paid $70 for anything from United Cutlery, and I still won't. But I picked this up for about half that. This particular one is from Bud K, because I came across Bud K when they were offering free shipping, and I bought this and the Timberwolf massive micarta Bowie knife, which I will also be reviewing and testing. Okay, I was surprised pleasantly when I got this knife out of the box. Came decently sharp. I have sharpened it for the sake of testing when I go out tomorrow. Hopefully tomorrow if it doesn't rain, or whenever I take it out to test. It feels good in the hand, and even though it's got the knuckle dusters, it's not that restrictive when it comes to grip. You can get a saber grip on it. You can get a saber grip on it. You can get a handshake grip on it. Of course, you can get a hammer grip on it. It's not bad in reverse grip at all, but I think with a knuckle duster, it might, if you're trying to strike with it or something, could conceivably be a liability to you, but you could get away with it. It seems very solid. No play in the blade. Blade is nicely centered, which again is a surprise from United Cutlery. Now, the one issue that I found with it very quickly, and I don't know if you can hear this, but there's while the grip is mainly high-grade aluminum, the back strap is plastic, and if you can't hear that, it rattled like this right out of the box. Now, I don't think it's not going to come off, and I don't think it's going to affect functionality at all. But it is very annoying. Now, I left it this way because I knew I was going to review it, and I wanted to be able to demonstrate that. I had tried the screws holding everything together here are hex screws, and I had tried tightening the hex screws to eliminate that play. That didn't work. After the review, just because it's annoying when you handle it, I'm probably going to get some blue Loctite to lock that down. Now, it's annoying. It's not a functional problem, and it's better than most United. But United Cutlery itself is asking $70 for this. And if you're paying $70 for a knife, it should not rattle. I don't know if all of them are like this, but none of them should be that way for the kind of money they're asking. For $35, it annoys me, but I can kind of give it a pass. But that is a problem. Now the sheath, again, is better than what you usually get from a United Cutlery, in that it's not totally crappy. I don't have any faith at all in the stitching that holds this together. It's thin and it's single column. But what they've done is they've taken the eyelets for the crappy tie cord, which doesn't even resemble actual paracord, and they double as grommets. So this is a lot more solid than most United Cutlery sheaths. Let me put the blade down a bit. It has a belt loop. It's Velcro, which is nice, right? It has a cardboard insert, so you can get the knife in and out easily. Now, normally I am not a fan of a handle retention strap. Usually I think the one that goes around the pommel is enough, and there's no reason to have two. This knife is the exception, and I'll show you why. When you put the knife in the sheath, first of all, let me tell you that this is very, very handle heavy. This is heavy aluminum, and it is very handle heavy. So what that happens is you put the knife in the sheath, and it's on your belt. And I did wear this around the house for about a half a day, just for the sake of review. And this is what it does when it's on your leg. Unless you tie it down, and tie this down, really, you shouldn't have to. It goes like this. It's annoying and it's heavy, and after a while it becomes very uncomfortable. But the sheath is adequate. I don't think this would stand up to a lot of field use, but again, I don't think this really is ever going to go down the field for everybody. This is kind of a novelty collector's piece. Now, holding it though, I think it's going to go well out at the war post. And I've got some ideas about testing its piercing, because this is definitely a thrust-centric knife. Yes, you could fight with it, but that's really all it's good for. This is not going to be much of any kind of outdoor or survival knife. And of course, like I said, this is not what it's designed for. This is designed for, well, really, it's primarily designed to look good in a collection, to be something unusual, which is why I bought it. But they do call it Combat Commander, and they do call it tactical, and it is obviously a fighting knife, so it should be able to hold up to fighting with it, and I think it will. But it's too thin in the spine to do any kind of batoning with for certain. Yeah, the thickness, as in what has a good fighting knife should be, is in the middle of the blade. It's got a nice, fairly shallow but very nice hollow grind. It was fairly sharp out of the box, but I did sharpen it up a bit. As I said, you're not really, it's not really designed for it, but I suppose you could chop with it, because you could hold it like this with your finger in the very last finger hole of the guard. Wrap your finger around here. My finger just falls right into the crest of the skull crusher here, and you suppose you could get some chopping thing, but it is so handle heavy that it's really not going to chop well. She's a fighting knife. This is, in case of zombie apocalypse, break glass. So that's my first impression of this before I test it. I expect this to hold up to my test. I don't torture test. If you watch my videos, the few of you that have, you'll know that I don't do torture tests. I don't believe in torture tests. I test the knife for what it's meant to do. So this is going to be testing its combat capability, including the skull crusher and the knuckle duster. Now, I'm a little leery of that, so I found some fairly thick gloves that I hope will fit through the holes, because when I do this, when I use the knuckle duster, if this aluminum isn't as tough as I think it is and it shatters, it's going to shatter sharp. It's just going to snap and it's going to be sharp. And the same thing with the pommel, so I'm going to take some safety precautions. But I'm going to test this as a fighting knife. I'm not going to do any carving or anything like that. So we will see how it fares against the war post, and I will roll that footage as soon as I make it tomorrow. I mean, not roll that footage, I'll splice this all together, and we'll see how this works out. But for United Cutlery, I have to say I'm not unhappy with this knife. In fact, I'm pretty happy with it. The rattling thing does really bother me. Just hearing your knife rattle even when you're practicing with it is not a way to build confidence. But by United Cutlery standards, this is a home run. The only thing is a little more attention to detail and eliminating that rattle, and they could have had something that can really be called, that I can really like. I like it. I don't really like it, and a lot of it has to do with this rattle. Now, after I bash it around a bit, if this rattle becomes more severe, then that could be a problem. But first impressions, not having tested it, this is the first thing that I got from United Cutlery that I didn't get out of the box and say, oh crap, this is crap, they've taken me again. I have been fooled yet again by United Cutlery. I didn't have to say that with this knife so far. So we'll take it out of the war post and see what she can do. Okay, here we are. Camera, tripod, hopefully a good picture this time. The Sentry Combat Commander Trench Knife by United Cutlery against the war post. Okay, that was the 8 angles on the slash. We'll do 8 angles on the thrust. You can see it's biting in quite well on the tip. Taking some nice gouges out of the wood. Oh, there's a gigantic miss. And again, I'm having trouble with that angle today. Woohoo! I don't know what the problem is on that miss. There we go. Let's try that again just for my own peace of mind. I'm clutching this knife. This is where the knuckle dusters are getting in my way. I'm just not used to them. And it kind of acts like, goes like this on my fingers. That's something I'll have to get used to. But boy, did that go in deep. And the tip and the edge are surviving so far. Okay, let's just go ahead with just go nuts a little bit on it. Okay. Smashing up against the wood, thrusting in the wood and having to pry it out. No edge roll. No tip damage. And even the black coating is staying on, so maybe this really is 1065 steel. We've bashed the blade and it's held up. Now it's got a knuckle duster on here on the grip. It seems to me we ought to attach a knuckle duster. So I've duct taped a couple of bricks to the war post. Let's see if I can break the knife and or my hand. Okay, this thing doesn't move, so I can't really punch full out, but I'm putting some fairly decent power in it. Now that's about all I'm going to do without breaking my wrist. Okay, but it didn't break. It did scratch the coating on here. You can see that the black coating came off of the handle a little bit, but I don't think they expected some idiot to be punching bricks with it. Okay, it's got a nice skull crusher on it. Gotta test the skull crusher. And move this there, I think, so I can swing better. Let's see if we can't break something. Okay. Well, I completely flattened it out. But again, I can't complain too much. It's designed for skulls, I suppose, and not bricks. But I'll have to take some file of that and fix that. Maybe dab it with a little paint. But, I mean, this rattle that was on here when I got it didn't get any worse. And let's face it, this thing was never really meant to be used in combat, even though it's called a Combat Commander. But that's what it is designed for. It's just that's not what United Cutlery has probably expected it to be used. So, did some damage to it, but it's not going to stop the knife's function. And This is not something that is it was intended to do. But you know, still, if you beam somebody with this in the head, it would be a really bad day for them. So that's about all I can say about it. I'm going to say a little bit more. I'll wrap up. I'll go inside to film that. But for 40 bucks, if you're not an idiot and try to break it like I did, and you want a nice little collection piece that's unique and there's not many of them out there, for 35 bucks, yes. For 70 bucks, like United Cutlery wants, no. And I will see you when we wrap up. Okay, well, you saw it, folks. The blade held up quite nicely. And realistically, I said this before, this is really for a fighting knife, which is what this is, other than just a display piece. What it went through is reasonably what you would expect a fighting blade to do. And the blade geometry, this just doesn't lend itself to any kind of survival or camp use. Other than looking cool in a collection, it's designed for fighting other human beings in close quarters. And it would work for that quite well. This would not be my go-to knife if in some bizarre world I had to fight a duel with a knife, or had to, in the real world, had to go up against somebody else with a tire iron or a machete or something like that. It wouldn't be my first knife, but it would that I would go to. But I wouldn't mind it. I mean, I would be reasonably assured that I had a chance of victory using this knife. Now, it did fail, kinda, with the skull crusher test. But as I said, I don't think the person that designed this knife and the people that made it thought somebody was going to go out there and try to crack a brick with it. But it flattened out the skull crusher, but it didn't render it useless. And on a softer target, like the skull of a lizard man zombie ninja, it probably would have worked just fine and ruined his whole day. As I said, you had that thing strapped to a fixed target, and that war post is set in concrete. So I really didn't blast it as hard as I could. I blasted as hard as I could without breaking my wrist or risking injuring my knuckles, which was, as hard as I was punching, if I had to smash somebody in the face, you know, that would have probably ended any encounter with lizard man zombie ninjas. So, final thoughts. This is much better than anything I've ever had from United Cutlery, and much better than anything I've ever seen by United Cutlery. So the Combat Commander line has potential. This failure doesn't concern me because this would constitute abuse of the knife. And as I said, a little file work, I could probably put a reasonable point back on it, touch it up with a little paint of some sort, and the same thing with the coating coming off of here. Now, having said all of that, when I was thrusting it and chopping at the wood with it or slashing the wood with it, I've had knives that cost much more from much more reputable companies, and I've had the black coating come right off of it. Gerber, I'm talking about you. This black coating reminds me a lot of Ontario knives, and I've never had any. I've got 3 Ontarios, and one I've got an Ontario Spec Plus survival knife that has seen a lot of use, just clearing brush here and there, and just all kinds of things, and the coating is still intact. I expected the coating to start coming off of this thing immediately once I started using it. Now, I've got this Ontario Utilitac 2, and I've been carrying it as my EDC and using it every day pretty much for just day-to-day knife tasks. and it's from Ontario. And in just 3 months, I'm starting to lose the coating. I expected better from Ontario. And granted, this is not a really expensive knife. This is a $36 knife, but still, I expected better. I never thought that I would see Ontario have a quality issue like that. And this is much more than I expected from United Cutlery, the way I was going at the war post. So I can't really call this a failure, because had I just maybe come in there and struck the war post to see how strong it was, you know, it wood and not brick, then I probably wouldn't have flattened it out. The coating coming off, that is annoying. But again, this is one of those things that even though they built it fairly well, and it did hold up fairly well, they never really expected to do anything but bring this out and look at it and maybe show it to his friends every once in a while. Now we come back to the backstrap here and the rattle that I showed you in my first thoughts. It's still present, but it didn't get any worse after I bashed it around a bit. But it's still an issue. So how would I rate this knife? I'm going to give this a 6.5 out of 10. And the biggest detraction is this rattle in the backstrap. You hear that? Even though it doesn't affect functionality, United Cutlery on their website is asking $70. And that can be very easily fixed. As a matter of fact, when I fix this issue, I'm going to go ahead and fix this issue now that I've reviewed it for you guys. But I took a half a point off of this simply because United Cutlery could have had a real winner here. This could have been a very good knife. This could have been an 8, maybe even 9 out of 10, because it is fairly sturdy. But this was so easily fixed, it should have never happened. And if they would have just paid a little bit more attention, this wouldn't have happened, and we would have had an 8 or a 9 out of 10. But because they didn't do that, and because I think that that's kind of lazy in the manufacturing, being lazy in the manufacturing process, I had to take off a full point. The other 2 points is because, yeah, I expected this to be tougher. I really didn't expect this to roll and the coating to come off. Because I have to assume that if you carry this around in the field, the coating is going to come off just by having it bounce around, especially the way it bounced around on the sheath. I mentioned that earlier. Now, they may not have expected anybody to actually use this as a field knife. They probably don't expect a soldier to take this into combat or for a SWAT guy or somebody. But somebody might. There might be somebody out there that looks at this and said, this is something that I might want to bet my life on. Particularly when you have, some of the preppers. I don't necessarily agree with the idea that they could carry this around. Or maybe even somebody is thinking about using this as a personal protection knife, keep around the house. If they're not into guns, but they want something and they see this. And this would work. Okay, slight interruption there. There was a minor crisis that had to be dealt with quickly. So I had to cut myself off in mid frame there. I'm going to just, a couple of last things, just decided to use my cell phone to finish up. As I said, this could have been a fantastic knife. And if you're not doing the gun things and you want something maybe a bit intimidating to keep around the house, to deter ne'er-do-wells, this would work. don't think United Cutlery really thought anybody was going to look at this as anything but a collection piece or a wall hanger, which they should have known better just because it's designed as a fighting knife. It's at least based on fighting knife designs. Having said that, if a criminal breaks into your house and sees this, it will give him pause. And if it becomes necessary to stop the ninja lizard man zombie that has invaded your domicile, you could do worse. I just wish they'd have just paid a little bit of more attention to the rattle on the backstrap, which is, by the way, plastic. Everything else on the handle is aluminum, but the backstrap is plastic. I don't know why they did that. It'll make it a little heavier, but it's already pretty handle heavy. So just in mind, because they based it on a fighting design, they should have paid more attention to detail as those details relate to using it in combat. Now, in between takes here, I did dab a little model paint on the end and file it off so it doesn't have those jagged ends on it, and then dabbed up the paint here. I haven't fixed the backstrap yet. If you realize what you're getting and you don't pay $70 for it, you can go to Knife Center, you can go to Bud K and get it for half that. Like I said, 6.5 out of 10. If you just want something that looks cool, or as I said, something intimidating, if you're not into other life-saving tools such as guns, then you can do worse. So I recommend it with limitations. It's basically that. So 6.5 out of 10. I'm not sorry I bought it, but I wish they'd have paid more attention to its construction, particularly in the handle and the skull crusher and this annoying rattle. So that's it. Remember, draw your knives only in just purpose, sheathe them only with honor. Also remember that without knives, life would be dull and pointless.